Good
I just
afternoon,
gave the Mauritian update. As you can see, under pressure today, down 0.7%. But the Mauritian bourse was one of the best performing, in fact, the best performer.
Correct.
A gain of 2.2% last week.
I guess just really a little bit of profit taking this week. If we just consider what happened last week, you had tourist numbers that were out. They were phenomenal, up almost 10%. But then one has to remember that really we're coming off a pretty low base from last year. We had the emerging crisis in Europe. We had the currency, or the euro, that was under a bit of pressure last year. And arguably that made Mauritian holidays a little bit more expensive. So really, it's a story of a recovery.
Fantastic. Also, I mean, looking at Botswana, which came in number 2 last week, that market rallied 2%. On the other end, we had Ghana, 2011 high. The market rallied a further 1.6%. We've got oil prices so very close to $100 a barrel as well. And this is one of the reasons that we saw the Ghanaian bourse do so fantastic.
Correct. I mean, essentially, if you look at Ghana, it's performing exceptionally well. You're sitting with a situation where the economy is growing at just short or somewhere around 8% for this year. The stocks are reaching all-time highs across the board, whether it's on the banking side or whether it's on the oil side. We saw the likes of Total Ghana gaining exceptionally well last week. And then this week we've got Standard Chartered performing well, we've got GCB performing well, and the outlook once again exceptionally positive.
Let's touch on Nigeria. The all-share index traded down 2.65% on Friday, but last week it gained around 1.5% over the week. We've had some interesting news out. We also had the Eurobond that was under the spotlight in today's session and most parts of last week as well.
Correct. Well, believe it or not, if you have a look at the Nigerian market, year to date, it's actually the best performing market on the African continent, being up almost 12%, and that compares to someone like Tunisia that's down around 11%. But really just having a look at some of the details in terms of what happened on Friday, the Nigerian government issued a $500 million 10-year bond. That was essentially priced at around 7%. The market, there was a lot of speculation as to whether this was going to be priced at a slightly more attractive rate. However, 7% we believe is very attractive if you compare this to the likes of Gabon, where government rates are at 6.2%, and then if you look at Ghana, where rates are just short of 6%. So really a very successful subscription, 2.5 times subscribed.
Problems problems in Tunisia seem to be filtering through to neighbouring countries. When you look at how the Egyptian bourse fared, it was the worst performing bourse last week, down 6.5%. Your view on this, and would you see it as perhaps a buying opportunity?
Well, really, if you just have a look at what's happening, it's really the story of the spillover effect in terms of what's happening in Tunisia, and a lot of question marks now with respect to what's actually happening in Egypt. There's been talk that the IMF has highlighted a few additional challenges within Egypt. There's also talk of political tensions now within that market as well. So really, it's a story of spillover effect across the whole of North Africa.
Ivory Coast, another very big issue there. I mean, down 3%. We've heard news that they've banned cocoa and coffee exports, and that is definitely going to be something that will hamper some of the listed companies on the bourse.
Well, definitely, and at the end of the day, that's certainly going to be squeezing the funding for the current incumbent president. I guess really at this point in time, there are a lot of question marks as to when he will be stepping down and when Ouattara will be taking over. As I said, a lot of question marks. But if one considers what's happening with respect to their bonds, they're currently yielding 16%. So you can clearly see a difference in terms of the risk profile between the likes of an Ivory Coast versus that of a Nigeria, a Ghana, and a Gabon.
And would you find this, I mean, a buying opportunity essentially getting into...
in terms of the Ivory Coast, we certainly see opportunity with respect to their bonds currently yielding around 16%.
And just taking a look at the cocoa price, the future price, I mean, over the past 2 weeks has rallied around 16%. That's absolutely incredible. Do you think that is going to filter through into some of the share prices?
Well, definitely. But at the end of the day, for us as consumers, it also means that our coffee and our chocolate's going to be a little bit more expensive. But when push comes to shove, that will certainly, really, have the ripple effect going through to the various stocks, and the likes of palm will be affected.
We spoke about the Kenyan market a short while ago with Isaac, but it was down around 1% last week. We saw further losses coming to the fore in today's session. It seems that price wars definitely on the agenda still to come.
Well, with respect to Safaricom, who own around 70% of the mobile market there, they're really competing with Bharti Airtel. Bharti's had very, very little to lose. So at the end of the day, they're really putting pressure on the overall market. They're essentially discounting pricing. And for them, they've got nothing to lose. They're going to be a net winner. At the end of the day, the question that we've got to ask is, what does Safaricom do? Do they go and compete on pricing, or are they just going to continue pushing their M-Pesa mobile banking offering and their data offering, which obviously they do have at this point in time a far stronger network.
South African markets, JSE All Share down around 1.5% last week. We saw massive flows coming through out of the bond market as well. We've seen weakness coming through in the rand. We also had the MPC rate decision last week. Rates held steady as well. I mean, going forward, there's a lot of volatility that could come to the fore when it comes to South African markets.
For sure. I mean, if we just have a look at what happened to the rand alone last week, fell around 2-3%. That's really been a story of what's happening with interest rates, as well as, I guess, in terms of the carry trade and the like. We left rates unchanged at 5.5%. If we look at the outlook, I believe that curtain for a narrowing of rates or a reduction of rates going forward in South Africa is really closing. We're looking for interest rates to start rising at the back end of this year for the countries in terms of in Europe and the US, and arguably the carry trade will narrow.